At the Miami International Autodrome in Florida, we saw a sprint qualifying session filled with twists and turns and a tightly contested field at the front. Let's delve into the telemetry data from the sprint qualifying to see if Charles Leclerc could have snatched pole position from Max Verstappen. The qualifying session in Miami was lively, witnessing continuous position changes on a track in constant evolution. Lando Norris's McLaren seemed to have thrown away the final qualifying lap, despite setting the fastest time in the second stage of the session. Mistakes that allowed Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc to monopolize the front row, separated by just over a tenth. A negligible gap that we'll uncover in the telemetry analysis of the Ferrari and Red Bull drivers, the top two in the sprint qualifying at the Miami track. Scuderia Ferrari nearly secures pole position for the Miami sprint race, but in the end it is Red Bull who once again claims it. Max Verstappen clinches pole position in the sprint qualifying session, despite the fact that the Dutchman had a less than brilliant session, with a general feeling with the car, according to him, which was certainly not perfect. Right behind Max Verstappen, we find Charles Leclerc with an impressive performance, as the Monegasque was able to get accustomed to the Miami International Autodrome within just minutes, having practically not participated in the only free practice session in the morning due to an unfortunate spin on his first run. Like the world champion, the Monegasque managed to activate the Pirelli tires better than his opponents, exploiting the grip provided by the softer tire. This despite making 3 corrections during the lap, which effectively slowed his overall lap time. Disappointment, on the other hand, is clear for the 2 McLaren cars of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The significant update package brought here to Miami works for the British team's car, but a performance step that was only evident with the medium tire. Once the cars hit the track with the soft Pirelli tire mounted in SQ3, the drivers found it more difficult to warm up the tires, resulting in a lack of grip and performance. We should also highlight the excellent performance from Daniel Ricciardo, who seems to have revived his qualifying skills on the American track, securing 4th position behind the Red Bull duo and Charles Leclerc. By analyzing the data relating to the first sector, we can observe some difficulties for Max Verstappen in traction, one of Red Bull's strong points. It is noticeable how the Dutchman adopts a similar approach to Charles Leclerc in the early races. The world champion with the softer tire is the best in braking from turn 1 and also holds the highest top speed. However, it's Charles Leclerc who excels in the exit. The Monegasque anticipates the throttle input and increases speed similarly to Daniel Ricciardo, benefiting from better traction. The Ferrari driver achieves top references despite making a double mistake: understeer at the entry of turn 1 and oversteer in the following corner. These are 2 minor errors resulting from the warm-up strategy, snaps that likely cost Ferrari pole position for the Miami sprint race. At turn 2, where the 3 drivers partially release the throttle, it is observed that the driver of the red car has a higher average percentage and releases the accelerator less than his competitors. Max Verstappen once again makes the difference in the fast snake section from turn 4 to turn 8. The championship leader navigates through turn 4 at a higher speed and is much more effective in the short accelerations straight before turn 6. Max Verstappen exploits a car capable of extracting greater downforce, especially from the floor. This grants his car greater stability in direction changes. At turn 8, however, the 3 drivers have a similar approach to turn 1, with Max Verstappen preferring the entry compared to Charles Leclerc and Daniel Ricciardo, who appear more skilled in traction. In the central sector of the Miami International Autodrome, Red Bull demonstrates its efficiency. Max Verstappen not only dominates in the fast snake section, as we've just analyzed, but also has the upper hand in the first of the 2 long straights. The RB20 single-seater is equipped with a better drag reduction system, allowing the Dutchman to regain lost ground in traction. The SF-24's setup seems primarily focused on achieving a high level of traction, useful for optimizing the approximately 1,000 horsepower generated by the Italian power unit 06612. This was the Maranello's team's primary concern. As in previous circuits, the red car lagged behind Red Bull in direct comparison during acceleration phases. In the only free practice session for the Miami Grand Prix, the SF-24 struggled significantly at turn 16, a corner the Ferrari technicians sought to optimize for the qualifying session. This objective was achieved, also thanks to Max Verstappen, who didn't feel entirely comfortable with the car. It is observed, in fact, how Charles Leclerc, although not achieving the highest top speeds between turns 11 and 16, manages to gain ground in the exit phases. Furthermore, the driver from Monaco fully exploits the serious mistake made by Max Verstappen, evident in the change of direction between turns 15 and 16. The Red Bull man, as seen from the minimum speed in turn 15 of 97 km/h, brought in too much speed on entry, attempting to cut the curb more aggressively. This move induced the tedious pendulum effect on the RB20, resulting in a detrimental oversteer that limited performance. Finally, let's examine the third and final sector of the American track. Once again, we can easily notice the various difficulties of the Dutch driver in acceleration phases. The reigning world champion is forced to delay throttle application due to excessively hot tires from pushing too hard earlier, something that was also seen in Carlos Sainz's case. This aspect costs the Red Bull man in terms of lap time throughout the first part of the straight. In contrast, Charles Leclerc, possibly due to a strategy on Pirelli tire activation, undoubtedly quite different, studied with peculiarities on the simulator, manages to exploit the compounds more effectively and, combined with the hybrid boost in this section, manages to match Max Verstappen's speed before reaching turn 17. Exiting this last corner, the Red Bull driver once again delays braking, and consequently his apex, conceding ground to his opponent in traction towards the finish line of the Florida track. The next data we will analyze is related to the top speed, with both drivers reaching the same peak speed, 338 km/h for both the SF-24 and the RB20, with Ferrari opting for a slightly higher load level than Red Bull. This choice, as we'll discover in the sector analysis, proved efficient and could provide a significant advantage in both the sprint and the main race on Sunday. In the sector visualization, the Red Bull remains the most balanced car, stable in corners and with great aerodynamic efficiency. The first sector, as in previous races, is somewhat of a weak spot for Charles Leclerc, where he loses about 0.2. Exiting turn 8, the SF-24 starts to show strength in traction and is very strong in high-speed corners. Arriving at the corner complex at turns 11, 12, 13, the Monegasque driver manages to surpass Max Verstappen and matches the Dutchman throughout the section under the highway. Here, Charles Leclerc gains a 10th on Max Verstappen, who nonetheless made an error in this section. In the third sector, a straight and 3 corners, the two cars are neck and neck, separated by less than 20 thousandths of a second. In the first part of the straight, the SF-24 has superior acceleration, but the Red Bull seems to have a hybrid management more focused on top speed. Diving deeper into the telemetry, we can better understand where the differences lie between the two drivers. In turn 1, Max Verstappen makes the difference, aided by a more responsive tire that allowed him to brake later, gaining +0.4 seconds. However, when opening the throttle, Charles Leclerc manages to recover more than half of the gap. In the first sector, differences emerge in the 4-5-6 section, where the Ferrari driver struggled with entry and had to brake to stabilize the SF-24. Once again, the gap widens at the end of the first sector, +0.4 seconds. Strong traction, as mentioned earlier, allows Ferrari to close the gap until turn 11, where shortly after, the gap fluctuates. In the 15-16 section, Charles Leclerc performs magic and exits turn 16 aggressively, reducing the gap to +0.07. Arriving at turn 17, the Red Bull's braking proves strong, but as before, Charles Leclerc exits the corner strongly, bringing the final gap to +0.1. It's difficult to say whether the Monegasque driver could have stolen pole position from Max Verstappen, but it's worth noting that the Ferrari man driver had only completed 3 laps in the first free practice session. In a track like Miami, confidence is crucial, which grows with the number of laps completed. One thing is certain, with a few more laps, Charles Leclerc could have squeezed a bit more out of the SF-24 and perhaps closed the gap to Max Verstappen by a few thousandths.